everyone. Welcome to Conversations with Nicole. Today, we're tackling a tough issue that faces many communities, but today we're talking about Georgetown County, South Carolina, and how they're facing an opioid and fentanyl crisis. Like many communities, they are not alone. I'm honored to have with me today Georgetown County Sheriff Carte Weaver, alongside retired Army Major General Jim Coggin of Pawleys Island Community Church. Gentlemen, thank you so much for being my guest today. This is a very serious subject.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you.
We have a crisis on our hands when it comes to these drugs and how they are taking over families, communities, entire counties, states, and nationwide. Sheriff, would you like to address that first?
Yes, what we've noticed, and it's nothing new, we've noticed an increase in calls for service in Georgetown County alone. Yes, it's a nationwide problem, but I'm the sheriff here in Georgetown, so I see it as part of my responsibility to not only enforce the laws, but to inform the community and raise awareness of issues that are of a public safety nature. In opioid and fentanyl abuse and the deaths that those abuses cause is definitely one of those public safety issues that at least needs to be said out loud and in public. And what we've noticed in the last few years is an uptick just in my agency would overdose calls for service. We had 162 last year compared to 127 before, just in overdose calls. Now, some of that's opioid, some of that's fentanyl, and some of that's unknown. But the statistics out there show us that there is that evil lurking, and it is fentanyl and the abuse thereof. And so that's why shows like this and upcoming forums are important.
And Jim, as a member of the community, you're concerned about it and you want to help find a solution.
Absolutely. It's a real issue. It's not an issue that is just being discussed casually. It is a crisis, and what it means is there's trouble and danger, and there's action that has to be taken. And for guys like me, I've got children and grandchildren in the local area, and this touches not just the addict, this touches the family and all the friends and everyone who loves that person. And so it's a call to action.
Absolutely. So as we talk about this call to action, Sheriff, you're actually planning 2 upcoming forums.
It's the opioid and fentanyl crisis in Georgetown County, in a forum dealing with those issues. The first one will occur on October the 11th at 6:30 p.m. in the Pawleys Island community of Georgetown County at Pawleys Island Community Church. Again, 6:30 p.m. on the 11th. The second and same forum, but just in a different location, will be October the 13th at the First Baptist Church in the city of Georgetown, South Carolina, also at 6:30 p.m.
And this is a panel discussion. So you're bringing in a variety of people who have knowledge of the problem and want to work in the communities to change things.
Absolutely. Because the message has to be believable. In order to change someone's habits or stop them or make them think before even taking an opioid, the message has to be believable. So that's why it was important to put together a panel of folks, per se, that were trusted. Just like our first panelist is Dr. Gerald Harmon from Pawleys Island, who's a past president of the American Medical Association. He has huge insight on what's going on around the country, not just in Pawleys Island or Georgetown County. And it'll be other law enforcement experts. There will be treatment experts there as well, drug and alcohol abuse, state law enforcement individuals, to give a total picture or just a snapshot of where we are today.
It sounds like it's going to be a real opportunity for people to have a true understanding of this crisis. But people of the community don't come together to really work with law enforcement. It makes law enforcement's job so much harder. This is important to you. Talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely is. And Pawleys Island Community Church is so pleased to host the Sheriff's Forum on October 11th. It is the opportunity to define the problem. And it's going to be, I think, a wake-up call for many. And my heart's desire would be for the entire community to fill that sanctuary to its capacity, because it is exactly what you said. This touches us all. It is a problem that is nationwide, as the sheriff said, but in essence, it's a local problem. It's a problem of the supply of drugs, and it's a problem for the demand of drugs. And that touches so many. And it comes from all socioeconomic strata. It's just not those who are maybe down and out in life. It's for very successful people are victimized by this as well. And the concentric circles of impact just echo across the community. Yeah, it's serious. We need to do something about it.
And I know that moving forward, your hope is along some other individuals to have some programs, maybe eventually to start a nonprofit that would give the sheriff really the support that he needs to be able to lessen the supply and lessen the demand for these drugs that are in the streets of Georgetown County.
So we're looking not only at law enforcement, but judicial systems, the legislative actions. Clergy, Pawleys Island Community Church has got some initiatives, which I can summarize here in a moment, and then community action at large. So it's more of a holistic approach to a very complex problem that touches so many.
Right. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more about your approaches that you're speaking of, Jim?
Well, I think primarily it starts out with what is the aim? What are we seeking to accomplish? What's the goal? And it's to stop the dying. The end state of drug addiction is a person doesn't survive it without intervention. So it starts with just saving lives, but as necessary as that is, it's not sufficient. We have to transform those lives so that recidivism is not an issue where it reoccurs. And so in a local area, there's some excellent programs ongoing now that have crisis intervention characteristics. And they're all necessary. And these people step up to that challenge, to a difficult challenge every day. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It doesn't handle the long-term problem. So I think to the church component of this, speaking for Pawleys Island Community Church, we've got some spiritual-based and relational-based mentorship programs that are going on. In this case, a group of men that meet weekly and have accountability. And what has been recognized, a key recognition, is this is a long-term program. It's not just a 30-day inflection point. It's a long-term program. So that's ongoing, and that's good. And there's a lot of that across our local area and our state and across the nation. But more can be done. And that is the effort that is ongoing by a group of men, which I'm excited about. And it goes beyond just episodic engagement to a long-term engagement. And I'd love to talk about it in more detail later.
Well, I would love to talk about it as well as you get to that next steps for those programs that you envision. Sheriff, why do you think it is that we are seeing more of these drugs in our communities and more users? It's just mind-boggling to me that it's hard for you as law enforcement to stay on top of this as the problem grows. And why is that? Why is it growing?
Well, the problem started with the opioid use, with the pain relievers that were given by doctors back years ago, and it has put us to the point where we are now. I'm sure Dr. Harmon and Dr. Gallico will have Dr. Gallico, who will be a panelist as a pain management specialist with Tidelands. He is going to discuss that further on really the roadmap that got us to where we are today because of misuse of opioid drugs or pain relievers. The other part is it doesn't matter what your politics is. We're talking about the illicit manufactured fentanyl that's coming to the United States from China.
Yes.
And again, it doesn't matter your politics, but they're coming across the border in Mexico like a fire hose. Mm-hmm. And that is so hard to combat at the national level and at the state level and definitely at the local level. So that is what we are seeing.
I feel for you and your staff that they're working night and day to try to get a handle on this situation. But it has to be somewhat, hopeful to have what you're doing with these forums and to have people like Jim and the folks from the church and other areas of Georgetown County saying, we want to help. We see that it's just not a criminal thing.
Mhm.
And that's what's important. Obviously, you're always going to have people in the social media realm or universe that just want to click or negative comment and not be a part of the solution. They're a part of the problem. And then you do have people like Jim Coggins and other community members that actually understand the issue more than just a simple Google search. And they want to get out here and try to provide the treatment that these folks need.
The supply is what law enforcement and the judicial systems are going to focus on. But I think in our local communities, we have a role to address this demand. Those that are seeking these type of abusive drugs, and I think the key is the reduction in both is required to be effective. And that's where it's interesting that the two of us are sitting here representing the supply and the demand components of this challenge.
And we need treatments that take people totally off of illicit or illegal drugs. There's going to be a push come the next legislative session in Columbia to legalize marijuana, whether it be medical marijuana or recreational use marijuana. And the argument is going to be made that marijuana will help stem or curb the tide of fentanyl use. That's baffling to me. Why would we want to introduce another drug when we're dealing with the opioid fentanyl issues as we are? So those are the things that we kind of see on the horizon that is not helping the issue.
How do you get the general public to understand what you just said? Because they're thinking, well, it's out there. You might as well just give them something small and they'll be okay with it. Or, the medical part actually does help with something. How do you get that message out?
Well, again, it's awareness through the forums.
Mm-hmm.
And then people have to understand what the issues are in the misuse of these drugs. And then what the likelihood of them or a loved one being hooked or these drugs taking over their bodies. And then hopefully you're resulting in 100% avoidance if you can get those messages clearly stated to the public. And it's through believable panelists like the ones we'll have on the 11th and 13th of October. The drugs that we're talking about today, as far as opioids and fentanyl, they are FDA approved drugs. If the legislature wants to pass marijuana, then why can't it do three things? Number one, have it approved by the FDA. Number two, have it prescribed by a doctor. And number three, have it filled by a licensed pharmacist.
So why won't they do that? It seems
well, and
sense to me.
That's the $100 million question.
Mm-hmm.
If you do those three things, then maybe marijuana use can be regulated at the medical level. But until we get to some kind of reasonable, sensible regulation, it's apples to oranges in what we're dealing with here.
Sure. And I mean, these drugs are just off the charts that people are getting a hold of. And unfortunately, sometimes people will try them one time and that will be the last time they ever try
Absolutely.
them because they are gone. It takes their life.
I think what the sheriff's saying here about enforcement is just absolutely vital because that is directly related to the supply. And so if we have these open approaches to alcoholism or marijuana use, it's in many cases it's an entry experience into the abuse of drugs that has an increasingly deleterious effect down the timeline. And so why allow that to begin? Because it's gonna not end well.
Yeah, Nikki, we've had, and I don't like statistics, but we've had 297% increase in drug arrests from 2016 to 2021. But yet we are still seeing the overdose deaths increase along with the overdose calls yearly. So that shows you, yes, we can arrest, but it's not even stemming the tide whatsoever.
Know people that I've spoken to that have had this crisis within their family, they want help so much for their family member or their friend, and they reach out to many different resources and can't really get the help and can't get that person out of the crisis that they are in with the drugs. That's where it's going to make the difference to have someone like Jim and his folks in the community coming together, because you can arrest them, but you've got to get them the help and you've got to take it to the next level. And people in the community have to buy into that, to say it's just not an arrest thing, it's a help thing. And having a resource will make a difference.
And just like one of our panelists is Brian Braddock, and I believe he's a city councilman in Florence, South Carolina, right up the road. Yeah. And he is the CEO of House of Hope of the PD. And he has an 80% positive recovery rate compared to, I believe, a national 12% recovery. And that is why the treatment is so, so important.
Well, as we close, gentlemen, what would be your final thoughts about where we are with the crisis and getting people to come to these forums and next steps?
Well, on the sheriff's office level, our purpose is obviously raising that awareness, raising that understanding, showing the likelihood of what could happen to you or your family if you misuse these drugs. And then ultimately the goal is the avoidance altogether. And again, you can only do that with a believable message. And that's why we've put together the panelists that we've put together for these days.
Now, I would just add, I would hope that our entire community, Merrill's Inlet, Pawleys Island, October 11th, unless you're in the hospital, you ought to be in Pawleys Island Community Church, listening to a true definition of the problem and the challenge. And then just a couple of days later, here in Georgetown, October 13th, First Baptist Church in Georgetown is hosting the same event. Please come. Please come and increase your situational awareness, because this is a crisis. We've had over 100,000 deaths across the country in the last 12 months. Yes. And that's been going on for the last couple of years. And that's staggering. It's time to address it. It's time to address the challenge. And why not let it start with us?
Get involved. That's when it makes all the difference. Don't sit on the sidelines. Be the people that get involved to make the difference in their communities. Gentlemen, I want to thank you for being my guest today. It's been an honor to speak with both of you. Thank you again. And thank you for what you're doing to make our communities better and safer and healthier and saving lives. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks for this opportunity, Nikki.
Yes, we'll stay in touch. We'll do it again down the road. That will do it for this edition of Conversations with Nicole. Until I see you again, I hope you have a great day.